Hey guys, welcome back to another episode. So in today's episode we actually took the vehicle to GTURBO, as you would have seen, up in Perth. That was an experience of its own. So anyway, I'm going to show you exactly what we got up to when we went to GTURBO. Now, pretty well self-explanatory. Obviously we did a turbo. That's the irony of why you would go to GTURBO. Anyway, with that we'll get into this week's episode. So anyway, what did we get up to when we went to GTURBO? So as you might have seen, the car has been overboosting for a little bit now. Well, when I say overboosting, not overboosting as such. The place that we had it tuned at originally, we're running 24 PSI boost through it. From everywhere that I'm reading, places like GSL, GTURBO, all the big headers basically say you can only tune these turbos to 19 PSI. Now the pre-DPF ones, you can tune a little bit more out of them, but they are saying now that as those turbos are getting older, they're just reducing them back to 19 PSI anyway. So that's what made me go, well, if I'm going to pay for a retune, I may as well get a little bit more out of it. And a little bit more out of it was a little bit exaggerated. Well, under-exaggerated, one of the two. Anyway, there's a few little snippets here from when we took the car out to Chains Beach over the weekend after we got it back from GTURBO. Now, I've been dealing with this guy. His name's Cody. If you want to chat to him at GTURBO, he's wicked to deal with as well. It's been an absolute pleasure. He'd send me photos of all the updates that he's up to, kept us all in the loop as well. And yeah, like previous experiences with other places, that's just the sort of service that you don't get. When we were there, they were running a little bit late and behind time with getting the car done, because of the weekend before they had a race. They took the 200 out of theirs, and they've got a buggy as well that they also took out. So they were trying to get that back on the road in the meantime. From there, because the car was running a little bit behind schedule, we were actually in Perth when it was getting tuned, like obviously all the finish off up on the Friday. So we actually managed to watch the car get tuned. Now that is one epic experience, to watch your own vehicle get tuned. Watching it on video or watching other cars on video does not do it justice. The stress that they put the car through to make sure the car runs to its full potential and capabilities and it's not going to have any problems for you is bloody mind-blowing. Yeah, I can't tell you how good it is. If you have the choice or the opportunity to see your car getting tuned, or if you could pay money for it, I would certainly pay money to watch someone tune your car. Now, I know some people are like, well, that's a bit exaggerate. Like, you know, you're probably paying them to tune your car, you may as well just watch it. But yeah, it is a pretty cool experience. Like, I know other workshops, they all have their dyno like in the back of the workshop, so you can't really go out there. Now GTURBO just have a piece of flagging tape across the front of the roller door, so obviously you can't go in there when it's on the dyno. So Graham himself, he did tune the vehicle, and then Cody actually gave us a little bit of a walkthrough of where the turbos are made. So here's a little bit of food for thought for you. Their turbos, so the housing is made in, I believe it's Japan, from a company that makes all the other big brand name turbos. I'm not going to say any names because I don't want to be demonetized or to be sued for anything, but basically all the big brand name turbos are all made in this factory. So what they do is they buy a casting from this manufacturer, and then they receive it back in Perth, and they've got a 5-axis milling machine, which you will see on their socials in a couple of later videos that they've done, where they've actually had the 5-axis machine actually fully boring out, or whatever you call it, milling out the turbo. And then they had, I kid you not, hundreds of compressor turbine wheels on the bench, on racks. And Cody informed me, I had a bit of a look, they've all got little like white marks on them, and that's when they've actually got to balance the wheels, or the compressor wheel, because obviously it spins so fast, it's a bit like a tyre. They've got to balance them. I didn't ask how they balance them, but I assume they obviously take out little pieces of material just to try and get the weight of it, or add it. I'm not really too sure. I'm just guessing now, to be honest. So that was pretty cool, all the way through to how the turbos are fully manufactured. Now, so they basically run, so I think they had like 3 or 4 little workshop rooms. One of them's just like the milling room and the balancing room. They got another one where they basically do so they've got 2 rooms for R&D. So that was pretty cool to go in there and see that as well. And then they got another room which is just their assembly room. So everything's all done at the same step. So for instance, I think there was like 10 or 15 turbos on the go at once. So he was saying that they just do step by step on each turbo. So they'll have like 10 going. They might assemble, I don't know, I'm just guessing here, but they'd assemble the vanes or whatever, or the compressor wheel, I don't know. But it's all done in a sequence, so all the turbos, so 15 turbos are getting built together. A bit like a train as such, of, yeah, how it's being built. Anyway, I'm rambling on a little bit now. So, anyway, I'm not going to tell you the figures of what it made yet. I was told it was a bit of a big hitter. A little bit more than normal. Graham uploaded the file. I chucked it on the dyno and then ran it up, and the apprentice that was there with him at the time, I've forgotten his name, sorry, he came back out and said it made X. I'll tell you after, once I've shown you all the engine bay, and that was a lot more power than what I was actually anticipating, that's for sure. And by the time Graham fully loaded the car up a couple of times, gave it a few more runs, and yeah, it came in marginally less than that first initial figure. So basically it was just cleaning up the tune within the file, and it happens actually relatively quick. So he obviously created the file prior to the car going on the dyno. Then the car went on the dyno, he obviously uploaded the file, and then he's got to try and tune the dyno to handle the amount of power and the amount of torque that you're going to put through it. So that was one thing I wasn't fully aware. It makes sense, like obviously if you got a little, I don't know, a little Jimny versus a big Ram and you're using the same dyno, a little Jimny ain't going to be able to turn over the dyno if it's set for, I don't know, like 400 horsepower. Yeah, so that's obviously why they've got to tune the dyno as they put the car on. So that was pretty cool to know as well. Anyway, enough rambling on. Let's get out and we'll show you the engine bay. What is that? Righto, what have we done? So, we'll start from the beginning. From the snorkel, we went to a GTURBO airbox. It's got a double seal around here as well. It's just to create an extra seal on these. And then we've gone to the GTURBO intake pipe or power pipe or whatever you want to call it. It's not a crossover pipe though, because crossover is from the back of the engine from one bank to the other bank. So some people do call these crossover pipes, and it's not a crossover pipe. So move down, and then we've got the rest of that intake pipe coming past here, and then they do actually have to replace the engine mount, which I assume is somewhere behind this strut tower. And then that's the big boy down there. So what is it, you may ask? It's a G333. It's their new latest and greatest turbo. It's not the biggest one you can put on these, it's actually the smallest one. Because I prefer the response and the drivability, and I'm not chasing horsepower as such and torque. I'm just chasing low down torque and drivability for the characteristics of the car. So then from the turbo comes back up into the PDI front mount intercooler, then running back out, probably can't really see too much. Yeah, so it's running back out through here. And then I opted for the dual intake rather than the single intake. They have this on their 76, which is their drag car as well. And they reckon they prefer it over the single. The single just cleans it up and makes it look nicer, but the dual, yeah, I think they've got less issues with blowing off hoses and stuff. Yeah, that's just what I've been told anyway from the guys at GTURBO. And the other day, when we took it to the beach, the car was running after, so I was airing up my tyres at the end of our beach run, and this pipe, same with this one here, they were actually cold. When I say cold, like, yes, okay, the car had been running, had been idling, but we'd just driven up the beach, not easily either, so I was going for it a little bit, and then decided I'd pop the bonnet halfway through, airing the tyres up, or I think it was the first tyre actually, airing the tyres up, and then that's when I noticed that, yeah, those intake pipes are actually really cold. When I say really cold, if water was that temperature, I'd be happy to drink it. That's how cold. So yeah, I was pretty stoked with that. Yeah, right. So what did we end up with? Now, some of you guys might have a bit of an idea. So we didn't do injectors, purely and simply because price is one, and two, I wasn't chasing horsepower. But a lot of people will argue, especially GTURBO, they'd still argue that, you know, you don't put injectors on purely for horsepower. You basically put injectors on to basically clean up the soot that's coming out the exhaust. Now, the previous tune that I had on this was very sooty, especially down low in the power range, and then as you rev it out, it certainly does get sootier as well. Now, when I was talking to Graham was all big for keeping the soot as clean as possible. When I say as clean as possible, I haven't seen any soot at all in my mirror at all. And my wife followed me back from Perth, and she said every time I overtook, every time I planted it at lights or whatever, there was nothing at all. So I'm very impressed with that. You know, you're getting a hell of a lot more power and a cleaner tune. Now, there's heaps of stories on TikTok and stuff like that of like GSL and Jake from TuneWorks basically tuning these vehicles that have been tuned, etc., from other joints, and the customer has opted for them to tune it just for the basically how clean they can get it, and while producing the same power, if not more power, than the previous place that was putting more diesel into it. Yeah, so I'm only guessing here. I'm guessing that the rail pressure is lower as well, and maybe the timing of the injectors is actually shorter, so it's not open for as long. So yeah, I'm just guessing here now. Righto, so onto the power figures. So I'll put a photo up of the dyno. I didn't get a sheet off them. I didn't bother asking because it was quite late. It's like 7:30 at night on a Friday, and Graham obviously wanted to go home, but he is one hell of a man. I tell you, he wants to be there. And you know, a business like that, he's probably got enough money that he doesn't need to be there at all. And he wanted to tune my vehicle. He was, yeah, whatever drives that man, give me some of that to go to work, that's for sure. Anyway, so on the initial run, when the apprentice came back out to me, it made 312 horsepower and 966 newton meters at the wheels. That was on the initial run. So that was after they uploaded the file without tuning it specifically for my car. And then by the time Graham cleaned the tune up, it came down to 307 and 940 newton meters. Now, those numbers sound big, but what you got to understand is 307 horsepower, that reached maximum horsepower at 2,650 RPM, which is absolutely bloody crazy. Now, stock on these things don't make power, actual horsepower, until well above 3 grand. I think the original turbo was making peak power about 2,900 RPM. And then the torque wise, so the torque made peak torque of 940 newton meters at 1950 RPM. So there's a copy here of the dyno chart so you can see where that was all sitting. Yeah, so then the factory turbo, this is probably something for a lot of people to sort of bear in mind. Now, although this is what they call a small turbo, it's a big turbo in comparison to the factory turbo. So it tends to, I was finding that the factory turbo would kick in at about 1700 RPM, and this one here you can notice sort of around about 1900 RPM. So it's about 200 RPM later. Now, this is something to bear in mind. Like, I was driving back from Perth and I was sort of going, I don't know if I'm really that stoked about it. Like, considering how much money I spent, I would have thought it'd have a little bit more pull. But to be honest, it probably comes down to maybe the injectors might give it a little bit more earlier, because they can get the fuel in cleaner earlier. So that might help with getting a little bit more pull a little bit earlier. And then I was sort of thinking, was that, no, it's probably actually what I was chasing, because if I went G350, yes, it'll make more horsepower, but it's a bigger turbo, so it's going to spool up a little bit later than when this one here spools up. And to be honest, I don't need to rev it out past 3,500 RPM. And whereas if you was to go for the GTURBO 400, the titanium turbo, running like 40 to 45 PSI boost, that one there, like, apparently they hold 30 PSI at 4,000 RPM. So, I don't know, take it as you wish. But to me, I'm not chasing that anyway. At the most, all I'm really looking for is to tow a trailer and a caravan and enjoy the beach and the dunes and travelling and touring around, and the drivability of the car. That's basically all I was really chasing out of the tune. Anyway, with that, guys, don't forget to like and subscribe to the channel if you're enjoying the content. Hit that thumbs up if you enjoyed this video. And anyway, with that, we'll see you guys in next week's episode. See ya.